Hey everyone, Brendan Sater here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me, and welcome to Van Halen frontman David Lee Roth, an album ranking of his solo years. So I thought with the tie-in of the most recently released box set, the Warner Brothers years, collecting together those albums that he did during that time frame from 1985 up to 1994, would be a good time to do a ranking of all of his releases. So that includes not only the 1985 EP, Crazy from the Heat, but also his 2007 unreleased studio album that is yet to see the light of day. So join me as I'm going to rank all 8 of David Lee Roth's releases. We'll get into that here in just a bit, but before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll stay up to date on everything going on in the world of music, just like this, with an album ranking for none other than Van Halen frontman David Lee Roth. All right, so we're going to kick things off here. As I mentioned, we are going to do all 8 of his releases. We'll add in the EP Crazy from the Heat, as well as that unreleased 7th studio album. And kicking off here at number 8 is, in fact, the unreleased album from 2007, would be his 7th studio album, if and when released, tentatively titled Giddy Up at the time. This one featured John 5 on guitar. We heard a lot about from John 5 talking about this album before it ever began to see the light of the day, where David Lee Roth eventually started dropping these songs on his YouTube channel, where we now have 10 of the tracks out there. The track listing so far for this, and we don't know what the order would have been, but you can actually go to his website or YouTube channel and check out Somewhere Over the Rainbow Bar and Grill, Low Res Sunset, Giddy Up, Alligator Pants, Pointing at the Moon, Nothing Could Have Stopped Us Back Then, Mandabella, The Shit That Killed Elvis, High Fashion Girl, and Wash and Fold. So the thing with this is, and that while we have John 5, who is a known shredder, he's played with Rob Zombie, he's currently in with Motley Crue as their guitar player, and very famous in the sense of a solo artist for what it is that he can do on the guitar. This album is not that. This is a real different style, doesn't even fall in line with what John 5 would do on the DLR Band. This one here takes on much more of a sort of folk rock style, if you will. It's just a very, very laid back, almost like it's roots rock or heartland rock style. And that reason in and of itself is why it's falling in last place, because in my opinion, it doesn't sound like classic Roth, but it also doesn't sound like any of the other Roth era albums. It might feel different once hearing it as an album mixed together, where you get to hear the totality of something. Sometimes in context, these albums come across a lot better. But for now, this album remains unreleased, although I'm sure at some point it will see the light of day. But for now, it's in last place. All right, coming in at number 7, we've got David Lee Roth's Diamond Dave, 2003 release, his 6th studio album, and so far, last one to date. This one here consisting mostly of cover songs on it. There are 3 originals on here, and there's also a remake of the song Ice Cream Man that Van Halen did, although of course Van Halen's remains to be a much, much better version in my opinion. But the 3 original songs that are on here still don't sound like regular David Lee Roth material. They are very much in the vein of what this album is here, doing a lot of cover song stylings in the vein of those particular artists. And of course, David Lee Roth all over the map whenever he does cover songs, certainly made notable when he first started out and he did the EP Crazy from the Heat. The personnel that's on this is really a hodgepodge of different musicians. There's no clear lineup on it. And I think that also lends to the sound of this album feeling very disparate and kind of all over the place. There's no real cohesive feel to the album. It's not quite understood what he was going for with it. So that in and of itself, for me at least, and the inconsistency in it is why it is coming in at number 7. All right. Coming in at number 6, Crazy from the Heat, 1985, his debut studio release, but as you can see from the 4 tracks, this is just an EP. All 4 of the songs that are on here are cover songs, and that's probably why, at least for me, it's ranking where it does. It does have the iconic California Girls, which really kicked things off for David Lee Roth, and I do like that song. And of course, Just a Gigolo was a fun video and single at the time, but I just really can't often get behind those style of songs that are a little tongue-in-cheek and don't really rock out the way that we know David Lee Roth can, not only with his solo stuff, but also with Van Halen. And so it's one of those things that was a fun listen at the time, but isn't something I go back to very often. So all in all, making this something that ranks a bit lower than where probably for a lot of other people might have ranked a bit higher. All right, coming in at number 5, we got Your Filthy Little Mouth from 1994, his 4th studio album, recorded with session musicians. This is a point where he started to move beyond from having a sort of band affair style to it, featuring the guitar talents of Carrie Kilgore in here, doing an amazing job on it. But the album itself feels like a stripped down version of what the first 3 albums from David Lee Roth sounded like. Those were the big over-the-top stylings that mirrored what Van Halen had done and what they were still doing at that point. But this album took a much different approach to it. Remember, the time frame on this 1994 alternative rock was king, and that bombastic over-the-top 80s sound was gone. So it was stripped away from this. The thing is, he still did an amazing job with this album. It's one of those ones that I actually skipped originally when it came out, picked it up a couple of years afterwards, and fell in love with it and have loved the album ever since. It does have a similar vibe to previous album, A Little Ain't Enough, but not quite as cohesive and definitely not as flashy as that album either. But Roth makes it work just fine. It has the song She's My Machine on it, the opening track, which was kind of the big out-of-the-gate song that would have been just like Paradise or some of his other big top songs like that. Although, again, as I said, this is a stripped-away version of that. And I think it was a bit shocking to people at the time when that song came out. And so it didn't click. It fell by the wayside. Thing is, I think looking back on this with hindsight, I think this album holds up way better than it was thought to be at the time when it came out in 1994. And I think in retrospect, this album is a lot better than it usually gets thought of. All right, coming in at number 4, DLR Band. In 1998, this came out, 5th studio album, actually coming out as the DLR Band. So really not a David Lee Roth solo album per se. He was trying something new. He was trying to distance himself, I think, from all of that. And the weird thing is there was like no promotion behind this. When I read that and I read this, there was nothing on here that said it had David Lee Roth or that it was David Lee Roth. It really came down to the "what was that" label that it was, knowing that that was David Lee Roth. And so I took a chance on it and was blown away when I found out that it was a brand new David Lee Roth album. Remember, 1998 is still a little bit before the real breakthrough of the internet when everyone would have it and it would be ubiquitous. That didn't really happen until later into the 90s and early 2000s. There was certainly internet going on, popular by about the early 90s. But again, like I said, not everyone having that sort of stuff. So it wasn't the kind of internet that we have today where you can quickly Google and look something up and know exactly what it was. This release, though, still, like I said, technically not a solo release, but good 80s era Roth return to form style sound. John Lowry, this is the first time that he engaged with David Lee Roth on here. We still have Terry Kilgore on this album as well, carrying over from the last release, Your Filthy Little Mouth, and those guys do an amazing job on here. What's kind of even more amazing is that the album itself only took 10 days to record, and as great as this is, and as you know, consistently good sounding all the way through, despite the different players and people on it. It's a fantastic album for having been recorded in 10 days. I would still like to have had the production be a little bit better on this, be a little bit more glossy. It's a little raw in my opinion, but of course it was 1998, and so I get where they were going with it, in a damn good attempt at doing the 80s style, big bombastic David Lee Roth sounds, but in the late 90s there. Okay, coming in at number 3, might be a shocker to some of you guys, Eat 'Em and Smile from 1986. Debut studio album, first full length at least, following up on the Crazy from the Heat EPs, but first debut studio full-length album, featuring the talents of Steve Vai on guitar, Billy Sheehan on bass, and Greg Bissonette on drums. An actual band effort that this album was here. The follow-up would do the same. So really only 2 band effort albums, and the rest of what he would do was predominantly session musician recorded. And I do think that has hurt his overall catalog. If he had kept more of the band effort feeling, these albums might be a bit more consistent all the way through. But this one here, absolutely kicking off in fine Van Halen style, with, of course, the classic Yankee Rose. I mean, there'll probably be none more classic David Lee Roth style songs than that one right there. And it goes right into Shy Boy, written by Billy Sheehan from his band Talus. He brought that over. So in essence, cover song right off the bat there. But the third song, it goes into I'm Easy, the lounge style song. And for me at least, it obliterates everything that we started off with that made this album sound like it was going to be a continuation of the Van Halen style that we liked so much all the way up through 1984. The next track, Ladies Night in Buffalo, brings it back. It's a mid-paced smooth rocker on there. You've got Going Crazy, but then it's followed up by another cover song, Tobacco Road, and it brings it down. And the ending of this album has That's Life, another lounge song. So for me at least, the album is extremely inconsistent. It's not an album that I pull out all that often. It has some of the best David Lee Roth style songs on it, but it's just not a consistent, strong listen all the way throughout. I do not think it is that classic of an album, so it is not ranking at number 1 like I think a lot of people would put it in at. I actually think this next one being even better, coming in at number 2, Skyscraper, 1988, the second studio album and the last to be recorded as a band effort. We still have Steve Vai, Billy Sheehan, and Greg Bissonette backing up David Lee Roth on here, although the lineup would splinter right after this here. I think Billy Sheehan might have been the first to go, followed by Steve Vai. Greg Bissonette would hang around a bit longer. But the album itself, I think, has a far better consistent sound all the way throughout on it. All the songs are original, so right off the bat there, I feel like it's a stronger effort and a more consistent sound because he's not dipping his toe into those cover songs like he had done on the first 2 releases. The thing is, it heavily relies on keyboards, and I'm okay with that. I like that, but it definitely dates the overall sound of the album. But as I said, I still feel it is a far better release than Eat 'Em and Smile, and I might be a tad bit nostalgic for this as it was the first Roth album that I bought, but it is one of those ones that I consistently go back to and listen to all the time. This is one I keep in my car. I think it is that good. And I am a huge Steve Vai fan, and I feel like Steve Vai really shone well on this one, even more so than on the debut. This basically became a Steve Vai solo record with Roth at the forefront of it. That's at least how I hear it when I listen to it. All right, and coming in at the number 1 spot, A Little Ain't Enough from 1991, his 3rd studio album, and first album without a full band behind him, recorded with a bunch of session musicians on it. At the time, guitar players on here are handled by Jason Becker, who is a well-known solo artist, having come from the Shrapnel label, so he's a shred guitar player, and Steve Hunter, who played with Lou Reed and Alice Cooper. So those 2 guys coming in to support on this album here, and I think they did a fine job. And even though this album didn't sell as much or have as big a hit as the first two studio albums, I still feel this is the best album. It is my favorite album. It's the most consistent listen all the way through, even more so than the Skyscraper album that I talked about. It also doesn't sound as dated. There's no cover songs on this one. So I think this one here is the most consistent and complete Roth era album that he did. Two main standout singles that were on this thing, A Little Ain't Enough, was right up there with Just Like Paradise and Yankee Rose. As big, bombastic, over the top. You couldn't get any better than that. If you were expecting more of that, you got it here. So it was a great way to kick off the album. And then he always mixes up. That second song was always something completely different. And he had Sensible Shoes, but instead of it being a cover song, a lounge song, or something like that, it was an original that he wrote, but it just worked somehow. Thing is, I think the rest of the album on this is just as good. I love every song on it. Shoot It, Lady Luck, Hammerhead Shark. I mean, I don't know where he got titles for these things, because he could basically take a title of anything and turn it into a song. To Tell the Truth, all of those songs on here are really good, strong songs that I think carry this album through. So for at least me, this one here seals the deal, making it the best album by David Lee Roth. There you go. That at least is my David Lee Roth album ranking, but it includes all 7 releases and the unreleased 2007 album, so that in all we get 8 different things here that he has put out ranked. And if we ever do see that unreleased 2007 era album, maybe my position on it will change, but at least right now I've heard those 10 tracks through YouTube, so I feel confident in where I'm ranking it on here. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know your number one David Lee Roth era album, and who knows, maybe we'll get lucky and one day see something else from David Lee Roth. Until then, we've got this. All right, take care everyone, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.